Hey, welcome to Cooking with Carver. Today we're going to be making braised pork shoulder. This is going to be a dish that we're going to turn into pulled pork. We're going to make it into a beautiful sandwich with some nice coleslaw to go on top. This is a lab that we are going to be showcasing various skills. The main thing we're going to be focusing on is handling tough cuts of meat. So this is going to be a roast that comes from the shoulder of the pig. Has a lot of strong connective tissue within the muscle. It has elastin, things that we need to take a long, slow period of time to gently break down so the meat comes out nice and tender. The cooking technique that we're going to be utilizing for this lab is braising. Braising is cooking in the oven covered with moisture. This is what's going to be the key to breaking down that elastin and making that meat super tender and delicious. The recipe that we're going to be preparing with this pork roast is going to be a braised barbecue pork butt. This is going to be a dish that's going to take around 4 hours to make total. Let's go ahead and get our mise en place established. That way we can get going with this pork. And the first step of this recipe, we'll be preparing a rub to marinate the pork roast for a little while. Super simple. All we'll need is salt, pepper, some chili powder, garlic powder. I'm choosing to use ginger. The recipe calls for coriander, but I prefer the taste of ginger myself, but you can do whatever you like here. Some mustard, 4 cloves of garlic, and then the liquid that we're going to be utilizing is going to be a can of Coca-Cola. To get started, we're going to go with 2 tablespoons of salt, 1, 2. You notice I'm not being super particular. This is something where it's a rub, it's kind of seasoned and flavored the way that you want. You can be as exact as you want or as casual as you want. For something like this, I do tend to be a little bit more on the casual side. I'm going to open up my pepper, and then we added in our 1 tablespoon of pepper. Now we're going to go to chili powder. Pop off that. Calls for 2 tablespoons of this. 1. Oops, just gonna use up the rest of it. With garlic powder, it's gonna be a tablespoon of this. You see, we're not going light here. Tablespoon goes in. From here we're going to start working a little bit smaller with the ginger. I'm going to be using 2 teaspoons. I really like ginger. It gives you a nice sweet and spicy flavor. This is a spice that's used often in Asian cuisines of all sorts. Because it has that nice balance in flavor. Now we're going to go with our mustard. 2 teaspoons of this as well. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and scoop. 1, 2. So, on to the next part. I've just pulled the roast out of the refrigerator. Now we're ready to move on to our first step of cooking. What we'll be doing is browning the meat in the oven, in a very hot oven. I've got the oven set for 500 degrees. It's still kind of warming up as we get everything put together. The goal is brown it for 45 minutes at 500 degrees. What this is going to do is lock in all the natural juices that are in the roast. It's also going to give us a nice texture contrast by forming a crust. So this is really important for the initial portion of this long cooking process. Okay? So I have a 9x13 pan, a roasting pan of any sort, what kind of work, anything that has a nice high size. So we're looking for a good 2-inch side or so to contain all the fluids and juices that we're going to be adding to this. Going to go ahead and open this up. Take that, place it right into the center of our pan. For this first part, we're not going to be covering it up. We're going to leave it open to the air in the oven. Again, we're looking for high heat. We're looking to get a crust forming. So the end goal after the 45 minutes is we're not looking for a nice dark brown, almost like a burned crust on the edge. And that's okay. It's called char, not burn. And it's going to give us a lot of flavors. It's going to give us a lot of texture. Now we're going to go ahead and get this into the oven. We're ready at 500 degrees. Make sure it's in the middle of your stove, or middle of your oven. And we'll set that timer for 45 minutes. During this time, perfect to start making that coleslaw that's going to be served with this. Our next stage to putting together this wonderful pulled pork sandwich is to make our coleslaw. Coleslaw that we're going to be making is super simple. It's basically a few veggies. We're going to make a quick little dressing, put it all together. This is a dish that really lends well to making ahead. So if you have a busy schedule, this is something that you can do when you've got free time. Put it in the fridge, and it actually gets better the next day or so after it has some time to sit and allow all of the flavors to meld together. For this particular coleslaw, we're going to be using a mix of red and green cabbage. We're going to be using some carrots. We're going to dice up a green onion just for a little extra flavor. We're going to be using some fresh parsley. And then for our dressing, it's going to be a simple mayonnaise dressing. Mayonnaise with Dijon mustard. Some apple cider vinegar for a little bit of kick, that traditional zing that you get when you're eating coleslaw. And then a little bit of celery salt, salt and pepper, or celery seed, salt and pepper. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start off with slicing down our cabbage. Beautiful red cabbage here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quarter this cabbage. I'm going to cut straight down through the core. That way I can kind of see where everything is. Cabbage is a very tight vegetable, so it is a little tricky to cut through. Okay. But once you kind of cut it in half, you can see that wonderful structure inside. Again, from here we're going to cut this down in half through the core. Okay. The purpose of doing this is that we're going to want to get rid of this core. Okay. So now we can kind of set it up, cut off that piece that we don't want to keep anymore. Okay. Same thing with the other core. Set an angle, cut away from yourself, making sure you're holding the knife properly. Okay. We're going to only use half of the red cabbage, and then we'll use half of the green cabbage. Okay. Now from here, after doing all that, then I like to go back, take off that outer leaf. That's the one that's going to be exposed to dirt, people touching it. So we take out that outer leaf. It's also going to be a bit tougher than the inside leaves from there. So this kind of gets us down to a little bit more tender cabbage. Okay. From here, we're going to slice this down in really thin shreds. So by having this structure set up like this, we can kind of see how the leaves are running, and we're going to cut across that grain that we see. Okay. You see I got this little leaf that's wanting to jump out. I'll cut that off, put it off to the side. So I'm just going to kind of set. Make sure to keep your left hand curled. That way the fingers are more of a guide. Keep your fingertips out of the way of the knife. Now right now our shreds are pretty long. Okay? So what we can do is we can kind of turn this to the side, and we can cut through the whole thing lengthwise. We kind of shorten those up a little bit. If you see any particular chunks that are too big, you can either simply remove those off to the side. You can take a little extra time to separate those or slice them down a little bit. If you're not too worried about the differences in thicknesses, that's perfectly fine. It's more of a preference for texture, having a little bit different sizes. So we can go ahead and take that, add it to our bowl. Break up some of those leaves. And I'm going to turn this all sideways so I can kind of cut those strips down a little bit shorter. That way we still have some nice length. So that way when you're getting a bite, you actually have something that kind of holds up a little bit. So the goal, or the purpose of this coleslaw is to then go on top of the sandwich. So we want something that's going to hold up a little bit, not just kind of fall apart as you're eating it. We're going to go ahead and open up our green cabbage and do the exact same thing. So I'm noticing with this cabbage it kind of falls off. I'm kind of having chunks that are kind of wound up on themselves and holding together a little tighter than I want. So I'm just kind of running my knife through them as they come off. This outer layer keeps trying to fall off, so I'm just going to take it off for now so I can continue working. From here, what I'm going to do is clean up my board a little bit, and then we'll get started on that carrot. Now we're going to work on shredding our carrots. First thing, always make sure you wash your carrots. These have just been washed. Now what we're going to do is give them a good peel, and then we'll work on shredding them. Now when you're working on peeling, make sure, again, that you're being careful. Peelers can take off your skin, so make sure you're being mindful of what it is that you're doing. Okay? Now, key with using a peeler just right. As you see, the peeler has our two blades set inside. Oftentimes, what I'll see is students that will try to angle the peeler to try to really maximize the one side of the blade. Don't worry about doing that. It's meant to just be held flat, firmly against your vegetable, and then to make smooth, quick motions. Okay? If you go too slow, it's not going to work as well. You want to be quick and concise. Okay? Notice I'm holding one end and I'm peeling away from myself. I'm not worried about trying to peel the entire length of the carrot right away. Okay? I'm doing about 2/3 of it, and then I'll turn it around and do the part that I was holding on to. Okay. One down. I'm going to move my peels into a trash bowl. And then do the same thing with the other carrot. I'm going to set this off to the side. And I'm bringing about my mandolin. This is a tool where my particular mandolin has a slot where I can put in various dies or blades. This one is going to be my shredding blade. So I'm going to slide that into place. This bottom side has these rubber feet that's going to help keep it in place. And so then what I can do is simply run the carrot over the mandolin. Now, my hand's getting closer. You have to be very, very careful with these. They are very sharp, especially if you're using the single blade for slicing. You really are dangerous if you're not being careful. Okay? Again, I'm starting to get closer. I'm not going to allow my hand to get too close. Right. Readjust. readjust. As I start really getting closer to the end, I start losing grip. I'm going to go ahead and stop at this point. I know there's still a lot of carrot here, but I really want to make sure that I'm being safe and I'm not going to risk my hands and my fingers or ruining all of these carrots with getting a little bit of my skin in there. Not feeling confident, so I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'll pull my blade out. And you can see all the big pile of carrots that we've got. Set this off behind me. Now there's a beautiful pile of carrots that we can throw into our coleslaw mix. That's going to give us a lot of really nice color. In terms of nutrition, it's going to give us a lot of really good things as well. A lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals, good beta carotene, vitamin A. Whenever you can add a lot of colors of vegetables to your food, it's the best thing for you. You're going to get a good variety of those vitamins and minerals. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slice up a green onion. Now this is something that the recipe doesn't actually call for. This is something that I just really like to have. I think having that little bit of onion, that little bit of kick and that bite would be really nice. Okay, so with green onion, you're going to take off the root, and then the rest of it is perfectly fine to use. Okay. From this particular one, I'm noticing that this particular branch or leaf is starting to kind of dry out a little bit. So I'm just going to tear that off, because I don't really want that. The ends are kind of dried as well, so I'm just going to cut those off. And now the rest of this can be sliced down and used. Okay? I'm going to cut it in half vertically. And then away we go. Now I know looking at this onion, it's very small amount compared to the rest of the ingredients here, but this is something where a little bit can go a long ways. Okay. With our parsley, we're going to get a nice large bunch. Stems can be used. They can be chopped up just fine. If you have the larger stem pieces, you may want to take those off just because they're going to be a little bit different. Texture wise, they might stand out a little bit more. So I'm noticing with this big bunch here, got a lot of stem there, so I'm going to take those off. Maybe add a little bit more. This is definitely where you kind of eyeball it. Use what you like. If you're not a big fan of parsley, you don't have to use parsley. You can use basil, you can use thyme, what kind of herb really that you really like. Now I want to take this bunch, kind of pile it together. Kind of give it a little fold so that it really kind of holds tight, because it's really frilly. It may not have a whole lot to cut through, so by rolling it up, it gives you a little bit more volume to cut through. The nice thing about parsley, they have a very fresh, very clean taste to it. So with all these veggies that we've kind of got going on, it mimics and echoes the same flavors that we've already got present. Carrot, the cabbage, very clean, very simple. So this should go together with our coleslaw nicely. Now we're going to pull this together and just going to give it a toss by hand. This one, or my bowl, is a little bit small, so I'm going to be very careful as I'm mixing it up, so I don't lose too many veggies, don't have too many runaways. So now you can see our coleslaw is starting to come together. We've got the general structure here. Now we just need to make our dressing. Put it in, toss it together a little bit more, and it's ready for the refrigerator whenever we're ready to use it. Our 45 minutes is up. Timer just went off, so let's go ahead and get our pork roast out, and we're going to move into our braising portion of this. So nice hot pad down to receive the pan. And that's what we have so far. So you can see we've got a nice crust, we've got some real dark spots, and we've got some lighter parts. By turning around, you can see kind of a seam in the meat where it's nice and juicy, opened up, ready to move into the next stage. Okay. With that sitting there, we're going to go ahead and drop the temperature to 325 degrees. I'll pop that door open and let some of that heat out so we can cool down a little faster. Now here, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be adding our Coke, and then we're going to be covering the pan with aluminum foil. We want a nice tight wrap. Okay. 12 ounces of Coke. We're not looking for a ton of liquid in this. We just want enough to add some nice steam. So before we pour this in, because it's a really hot pan, it's going to create a lot of steam, we're going to go ahead and get my foil ready to go. And measure it out. Give it enough to it. Yeah. Okay. So that's ready to go. We're going to go ahead and add in our Coke. Going to pour it over the top. Now from here, what we can do is we can take a few extra cloves of garlic. If you like garlic like I do, we can take a couple of these cloves. Okay. We don't really have to worry about the skin and whatnot. We're actually not going to be eating these cloves. These are just going to be here for flavor. So we're just going to kind of break them open, smash them, toss them in. Even if the skin's in there, perfectly fine. It's going to be that garlic flavor. We're going to take this section out before we actually do anything else with it. It's just there so we got something to enhance the flavor of that liquid. Okay, so that's gone in. Go ahead and do a little bit smaller than what we want. Be very careful, it's nice and hot. Grab one more strip. Over on that side. Tuck those pieces underneath the handle, make sure it's on there nice. Again, the idea is that we are trapping the steam and the moisture. Okay, and voila. Now, with the temperature dropping, we can go ahead and put this back in the stove, back in the oven. And now we're looking for about 2.5 hour cook time. Again, we're just going to let it do its thing, get nice and tender and delicious. So we're going to set a timer. We'll set it for 2 hours and then we can check it. If it's where we want it to be, awesome, we can pull it out and we can start working with it. If it needs a little bit more time, we're looking for a nice fork, tender piece of meat that falls apart nicely. Then we can give it a little bit of time if it needs to. But at that point, we'll judge and then move forward. Now we're going to get started on making the dressing for the coleslaw. Now this is a dressing that fits my personal taste a little bit more. It's not quite your traditional coleslaw recipe. It's going to be a little bit drier than what most people tend to like. But you can make adjustments as you see fit. If you'd like to add a little more liquid, if you'd like to add sour cream. This is something where I don't add sugar to mine, which is a traditional ingredient in coleslaw. If that's a flavor that you really like, go ahead and add some sugar. You know, make it the way that you want it to be. So we're going to start off with our base of mayonnaise. This recipe calls for a cup of mayonnaise. We'll grab a spoon. We're going to dish this into our measuring cup. Mayonnaise likes to kind of hold to itself, so really make sure you kind of press it down into your measuring cup. That's where you get it nice and filled up. Okay. Now I'm just going to use a large liquid measuring cup as my bowl. That way I can kind of pour it a little easier later on into our vegetables. Set that behind us. Lid our mayonnaise, put it off to the side. Next is going to be our vinegar. 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Check and make sure. Yep. And you can always add more if you want, or you can use less. If you're not a fan of the apple cider vinegar, you can feel free to use white vinegar or any other flavor. There's rice vinegar, red wine, white wine, all kinds of different things. Balsamic vinegar if you're into that sort of thing. Whatever you like. Again, with cooking in this regards, you make it the way you want it to be. You make it the way that you want it to be. Now we're going to add our Dijon mustard. What makes Dijon mustards unique is that it is made with white wine, so it has a little different flavor profile to it. We're going to be using 2 tablespoons of this as well. I'm a big fan of mustards of all kinds. Haven't always been a big fan of mustard. Some I had to learn to like, and since then, my world is a brighter world. Right. Mustard's gone in. Set that tablespoon off to the side. Now we're going to add some celery seed for, again, just a little extra flavor, give us a little texture. We're going to use a teaspoon of celery seeds. This is going to give us a nice, bright, fresh flavor. Again, also give us a little crisp as we're eating. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Of course, this again is something where you can do taste. And we'll kind of open my shaker out. And just a little extra. For me, again, with when it comes to coleslaw, I tend to not like things to be as sweet. I like it to be a little more savory. So a little extra salt for me and a little extra pepper as well. Okay. I'm also going to make a quick little audible. We used a little bit of chili powder in the rub for the pork. I want to add a little paprika to the coleslaw. What this is going to do is give us a little bit of smokiness. I'm going to open it up a little bit. It's going to give us just a touch of spice. It's going to be something that's going to help echo the flavor of our roast in with the coleslaw. Because these are going to be eaten together, we really want those flavors to really come together. Make it seem like they're meant to be together. Now I'm going to switch to a whisk to bring this all together. So scrape my spoon down. Set the spoon off to the side, and we'll get to mixing. And it doesn't take long to come together. Now we've got this beautiful coleslaw dressing. And it's going to be tinted a little bit red by using that paprika. Again, this is something where I'm just kind of doing it because that's what I like. If you don't want that color change, you don't want that flavor, don't use it. You can go ahead and add this to our coleslaw. I'm going to add about 1/2 to 3/4 of the dressing, and then stop, toss it, see how it looks, and then we can add more if we want to add more. But you can never take dressing out, you can only add more. So don't get ahead of yourself by dumping it all in. Now that we've got some dressing going on here, I want to take an extra moment to ramp up the cleanliness and the ease of cleanup. I'm going to take just a little bit of parchment paper. I want to set it down on my counter because I know some of this coleslaw is going to jump out. So now, once it does, we'll be able to easily collect it and clean up afterwards. I'm going to wash my hands quick, and I'm just going to use my hands. Okay. Ready? Here we go. And take your time. It won't seem like it's really mixing up very well at first, but just kind of keep working at it. You can already tell everything's getting nice and mixed together. Everything seems to be coated actually really well. I was actually a little hesitant if I had enough dressing on there. I personally, again, with coleslaw, I have a lot of opinions about coleslaw. I tend not to like a coleslaw that's really swimming in the dressing. I don't like it to kind of be pooled. I like just enough that it sticks to everything, and not so much that I'm eating more dressing than I am cabbage or vegetables. Actually, that looks really good to me. I don't think I'll even add any more. So with that dressed, we can put some little bit of plastic over the top of this and pop this in the fridge until it's ready to go. Until our pork's ready to go, I should say. We do have extra dressing. Don't just throw that away. That's a beautiful dressing. Be great on a salad. Add a little bit of sour cream for some body. You can turn that into a dip. There's all kinds of uses. You can use it as a marinade. All kinds of cool things. So don't just throw it away. Utilize what you have. Our timer has just gone off. Now let's go check our roast and see how it's doing. We're going to grab a couple forks so we can kind of poke and try to pull that roast apart and see how it's doing. Now, the nice thing about aluminum foil is that it cools down very quickly. So I'm able to kind of start grabbing and pulling at this as long as I'm careful not to come in contact with the pan too much. Now be kind of careful as you do this, because if you need to rewrap it, you don't want to destroy the foil. It's not too bad. Ooh. It looks really good. I think we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get rid of the foil. I'm going to move the roast onto a plate. And we're going to reserve the juices that are behind in a saucepan, so we can turn that into a barbecue sauce that we can put on the meat and keep it moist and juicy. So I've got my plate, and I've got my saucepan ready to go. So I'm going to start by getting the pork moved over. Now remember, we have those cloves of garlic here. Now that we've cooked it the way we have, we're going to make sure to pull out those cloves because they're whole. We don't really necessarily want those to be in our sauce. Okay. Now there's some stuff kind of crusted onto the bottom. That's perfectly fine. If you want to kind of scrape them up a little bit, again, this is good flavors. This is going to give us that depth of flavor that we really like in barbecue. So I'm going to kind of scrape those up just a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that. Just get what's loose. Okay. Now I have my saucepan. Just going to kind of grab this and carefully pour the juices into that pan. Okay, set this off to the side. From here we can add a few things to make it kind of our barbecue sauce. Let's go ahead and get that mise en place set up for that. Alright, I've got my ingredients set up for the sauce that we're going to do. So I've got my juices from the roast in a pan. Now we're going to add to it some ketchup. We're going to do about a half cup of ketchup. Whoop. Jumped off the side. Grab a knife, help scrape all that ketchup out. Okay. Goes in. Our next item is going to be Dijon mustard. Back to the Dijon. About 2 tablespoons of this. 1. 2. So again, scrape out that measuring spoon. Then we're going to go into some Worcestershire sauce. For this, about 3 tablespoons. 1. 2. 3. A little quick pour action. Okay, toss this to the side. Worcestershire goes to the side. Put away our mustard. And then what's going to help sweeten this all up is 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Doesn't want to come out. There we go. Press that down. Now we press down the brown sugar because of the molasses in the sugar. It keeps it to sticking together, and so there can possibly be gaps within your measuring device. Okay, so we press it down to make sure to fill all the space. When you flip it out, it should form your measuring cup. Okay. We're going to switch to a whisk to bring this together. Now we're going to put this on the stove. We're going to bring it up to a boil and let it cook for 15-20 minutes or so. So we're going to start at a high heat, let it come up to a boil, and then we'll drop the heat to simmer. Now we want to leave this uncovered because we're looking to cook out moisture and let it reduce and thicken and get delicious. I'm going to go ahead and clean up my ingredients a little bit, and then we'll start working on pulling this pork apart. Alright, let's get started on pulling this roast apart. Okay, I'm going to go grab my cutting board and bring it over. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the cutting board at this point because it's going to give me a little more room to kind of make a mess, and then I can transfer it back to the plate to hold everything together. Okay, so my forks, I'll transfer it over. Now this roast was wrapped up in twine. Helps keep the meat in kind of a solid, uniform shape, so for more even cooking. So I'm going to take a pair of kitchen shears, and if you can see kind of that lattice here, I'm also going to go through and cut that twine once I've got it cut down, then we'll start working on pulling it off of the meat. Now, if you've done this all correctly, you should kind of find yourself pulling the meat apart as you go, like that. Careful, it's going to be a little hot. And there's our netting. Okay. We'll set this off to the side. Okay. And now we can start working on our meat. Okay. So my roast is kind of falling apart into two or so muscle segments. Okay. So now from this point you can use 2 forks and you can simply pull the meat apart. The idea is that you're shredding it, working together, and then pulling away from each other. Okay. You can see how the strands of the muscle fibers are stacked on themselves when you do this cooking method. It's kind of fun as a study of meat and muscles and how they are constructed. Okay, so it takes a little bit of time. We'll speed up this process so you don't have to sit here and watch me too closely. Okay. So as I work a little bit and I'm losing space on my cutting board, I can go ahead and start moving some of the meat back to my plate, free up some space, and then go back at it. For shredding your meat, you can decide what the size of meat pieces do you want. You can leave some a little bigger. You can shred them down smaller. Your choice, however you like it to be. Now I'm hearing my sauce bubble quite a bit back here, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Give it a quick little stir. Go back to pulling. I really hope that you try making this at home because the smell in this kitchen is unreal. I cannot wait to dive into this meal. Now as you're shredding the meat, if you do come across a big chunk of fat, if you're not into having pieces of fat or larger pieces of fat through your meat, that's perfectly fine. You can go ahead and remove those pieces. I myself don't mind a little bit of meat flavored jello mixed through my meat. So every once in a while I get a nice chunk of fat that just gives you flavor and juiciness within the meat. But again, this is your rodeo. Make it the way that you want it to be. Now as you notice that his meat's kind of sitting on the plate, it is cooling down. So this is where having that sauce heating up in the back really comes into play. Because once I get this all shredded and that sauce is ready to go, I'll be able to bring the two back together and the sauce is going to kind of re-warm the meat and make it presentable. Of course you gotta taste your food. Not too shabby. And the last little bit goes onto the plate. Sweet. It's got a little spice to it. A little salty. It's going to be really nice with that coleslaw on top. Now again, here I got a few chunks of fat. I'm just going to discard these. A little thicker than what I would like, even though I do like a little bit of fat in the meat. So our meat's ready to go. I'm going to clean up our workspace a little bit, stir the sauce, and then we'll bring together our pulled pork sandwiches. Alright, we're about ready to assemble our sandwich. Finally. I've got our pulled pork sitting here ready to go. We've got our coleslaw out. It has now had some time to meld and for the flavors to marry. What we can do is grab a serving spoon or wooden spoon and kind of give it a quick toss. Since it's been sitting now in the fridge for a little while, the salts in the dressing is going to start pulling some of that moisture out of the cabbage and the carrots. So it's going to help make it a little saucier. than what it was before. So giving it a little toss, remixing all those juices that are kind of sitting at the bottom of the bowl. Look how beautiful that is. Okay. Now we can start assessing our sauce. Okay, so I'll bring this over from the stove. Give it a quick stir. Now this sauce as is, I'll grab a spoon so you can kind of see the consistency. This sauce is a little thinner sauce. It's not going to be your thick barbecue sauce that you generally would think of with Midwestern barbecue. But there's some things that you can do to change the texture and the thickness of this sauce. First off, you could add a tablespoon or so of butter right now and let that melt in. What that's going to do is going to give your sauce a real velvety finish. It's going to give it a nice shine, and it's just going to ramp up that unctuous flavor and mouthfeel. Another thing you can do if you're really looking for it to be real thick, real stick to your rib type of sauce, is you can make a cornstarch slurry. So about a tablespoon of cornstarch, another tablespoon or two of water, mix it into a paste. Make sure to put this back on the stove, and we're going to add it in with heat, stir it through, and that cornstarch is going to activate and it's going to thicken that sauce, and it's going to make it real rich. For this particular case, I like it just like this. I want it to be not too heavily dressed. I want it to be real simple. I want us to focus on the wonderful flavors that we've developed in the pork. So we're going to go ahead and pour some of the sauce onto our pork right here on the plate. We're not going to do a ton because we're not quite in the right dishware to hold all of our sauce. But we're just going to kind of spoon some of the sauce over top of our pork. Move this back so you can get a better view of that. Now there's plenty of sauce here, so don't feel like you have to go crazy. Like with the coleslaw, do a little bit, mix it up, see if it's where you want it to be. You can always add more, you can't take it away. Or at this point, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a pair of tongs and give this meat a little bit of a flip. Allow that sauce to work through. Okay, don't need to do a ton right now. I'm going to sauce it a little bit more. Just right over the top now that we've exposed some spots that haven't had the chance to enjoy the wonderful juices. So now we're going to leave this, and we can put some more of this on after we've built our sandwich. I'm going to transfer this back to the stovetop. Move our hot pad out of the way. Okay. So this is ready to go. Our coleslaw is ready to go. We have our roll here. Real simple. This is a purchased roll from the store. Nothing fancy here. If you really wanted to kick it up an extra notch, you could easily make your own rolls and really have that soft, delicious, home-cooked feel throughout the meal. Okay? Now, this is very simple. We can go ahead and build right here as is, but we are going to be kind of working with a little saucier meat and our coleslaw, so we're going to take this an extra little step. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to toast the inside of our bun. That way it has a nice crust to keep it from getting super soggy. Okay, now to do that, my stove has a griddle through the center. I'm going to use this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat on. Relatively high. Let it really get nice and hot. If you don't have a griddle like this, a saute pan will work just fine. If you want to use a toaster, you could use your toaster. You could also put it in the oven and use the broiler to kind of toast it up. Now, to help with that browning and toasting effect, we're going to go with some butter. Now this isn't just any kind of butter. This has happened to be something I have left over. We had spaghetti the other night, and so we made a garlic and parsley infused butter for bread, for toast. So I'm gonna spread that on to our roll. We're just going to take these over, drop it down. We're just going to let that go for a little bit and let it toast up nicely. Okay, so we're still checking our bread, making sure to not burn it. You're looking at a few minutes, get nice and toasted up. Okay, I think our bread's about done. Our bottom. We're going to let our top just sit, do its thing. Now we can start looking at assembly. Okay, so first off, our pork. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the tongs. I'm going to kind of get a pinch of pork and get a bit of twist. And then replicate that motion onto the bread. This is going to allow us to get the pork centered on the bread. Make sure it's not one side or the other. A few little pieces that jump away. Give it a little toss. We're going to throw some more right on top. Okay. Now we can top with a little bit of our sauce. Right over the top. Allowing it to run down. It's going to get into that bread just a little bit, but having it toasted is going to keep it nice and together. Now we're going to go for our coleslaw. Again, give it a quick little toss. And then right on top. A bit tries to jump away. Need to kind of readjust, rebuild a little bit. Feel free to do so. Grab a paper towel. Now what we're looking for is nice presentation and nice appearance. So we've kind of made a mess here. We're going to take a paper towel. We're just going to kind of go back, wipe up that plate a little bit, make it look like you care. And that there was never a mistake made. There was never any food on the plate other than what you intended. There we go. Come back to the top of our roll, nice and toasted, and we can set that down. Give it a nice little smash. And there you have it. Pulled pork, braised in Coca-Cola, served with a coleslaw on top. So let's cut it in half. Let's see that cross cut. And then finally, the big bite. Help this out a little bit. A couple toothpicks. And there we have it. Look at the colors. You can see the sauce and the juices. That is a beautiful sandwich. Now let's give it a try. This is everything you could possibly want it to be. The meat is tender, it's juicy, it's sweet and smoky. You got a little texture from that crust that we worked so hard to get. And then you have the vegetables that are fresh, crisp, real light and refreshing. That help to really contrast and complement the meat. And then the sandwich is warm. You have that nice little toast and a little bit of garlic butter that we put on there to toast it up. By far one of my favorite meals to make. Definitely my favorites to eat. Till next time, this is Cooking with Carper.